Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Fired Up. My name is Morgan McClintic, and I'm joined today by Nicole Patel.
Hey, Morgan. Hey, everybody.
So, today we're going to be talking about the changing role of the Chief Revenue Officer with Daniel Rock, who is a CRO at SweetFiles, which is a SaaS platform, an intelligent workspace for professional services organizations. So, we'll be talking to him all about what does a CRO do, his journey to taking the CRO seat.
All things revenue, trust me, the job is harder than it sounds. Maybe three words in the title, but a whole lot of responsibility. So Daniel's going to break all of that down for us.
And before that, though, we have just launched a range of solutions. So, how to launch a product, how to announce funding, how to generate more leads, how to close leads faster, how to be found online. I'm excited about this because they're really solving the problem for startups, and they combine a range of the different services. And so we're not just selling a service, although if you want a PR agency, we're fine with that, but we're actually combining those into repeatable solutions for common problems that we see with startups, or challenges or projects that we see with the startups we work with. And I think this is interesting because you're seeing more sophisticated agencies move towards this kind of positioning around a solution rather than just a specific service. And given that we have quite a broad range of services, we're able to combine those in a more cohesive way to solve the problem. And we've done it now enough times where we feel confident that, okay, if you need to launch a product, we can do that effectively. If you're only a PR firm, launching a product means writing a press release and doing that. But actually, from a marketing perspective, as all of our listeners know, there's far more that goes into that. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's mainly us answering the questions that we get. How do I launch a product? How do I announce funding and make the biggest splash with it? So I think it was the perfect next step for us to take. And we've got those processes, to your point, Morgan. We might as well put them out there and let them know it exists, because the odds of somebody coming in and saying, I need this and I need that and I need that, people don't always know what they need. So this kind of just, what do you need to do? What do you need to accomplish? And this answers that.
We'll let you know how it goes, but please check them out. So let's move on and talk to Daniel Rock all about the changing role of the CRO. Daniel, hi. Great to see you. Welcome to Fired Up.
Hi, Morgan. Nicole, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. Great to have you. So today we're going to be talking about the changing role of the CRO. And so just to start, can you just tell us a little bit about what the role is?
That's a really good question, and probably varies a little bit by business. So traditionally, it's been a mixture of sales, customer success, and marketing, owning those functions, and a combination of any of those three. Typically, it nearly always includes sales, and then will sometimes include both marketing and customer success, or sometimes one or the other of those. It's trying to bring that customer engagement, customer interaction, revenue generation pieces of the business under one umbrella.
So from the full customer journey, from in the initial sales, all, from marketing when they first become aware of you, all the way through sales and then customer service. So you can provide a cohesive experience there.
It is. And I think from that perspective, and we'll probably touch on this, it's really trying to get rid of those siloed behaviors that you see when those functions sit separately.
So you came to the CRO role from a background in sales, and you said, okay, sales is often like a core function for a CRO, but just talk to us a little bit about how that prepared you for the role.
It's interesting because I think the CRO role typically comes from one of two camps, which is either the sales background or the marketing background. A CMO or a head of marketing or head of sales will come into that role. For me, there's a danger when it's the person from sales that comes into it, that you can struggle to get the buy-in necessary from the marketing side of the business, or you become completely endpoint driven. And so, okay, I must generate this many leads because that's what means sales to me. And I think there's a real danger of that. And that's, I think you can lose sort of the marketing side of the business and even customer success side of the business if you become too sales focused. I think what it does allow you to do coming into it from a sales perspective. You've generally spoken to a lot of people. You've generally spoken to a lot of customers, a lot of prospects in terms of understanding what those requirements are, what people are looking for, what your ICP, you generally get a good feel of what your ICP and your personas are, and what that buying journey looks like to a degree. With that being said, there can also be a real danger of that being quite a myopic focus in terms of, okay, this is what I'm hearing from my prospects, this is what we must build, rather than sort of looking at the biggest picture. So I think, yeah, coming with sales aside, I think it does prepare you well in terms of being able to answer those questions, being able to really talk to your ICP, being able to sell the product, but you also have to make sure that you know what you don't know. One of the first things I've ever said to anyone who's worked with me as a marketer is, I am not a marketer. I know enough to be dangerous. I know enough to understand what you're talking to me about, but I could not execute it.
That's a great point. You bring up about being myopic and a little bit dangerous, and you're not taking your sales hat off. You're just sliding it to the side of your head and putting some different hats on next to it. So somebody who wants to go on this path, how do they prepare for those new responsibilities? You've got marketing, you've got customer success, you've got product, you've got all of these things that you've never done before, and you don't know what you don't know. So what would be your advice to somebody who wants to go on this CRO journey?
Oh, I think one of the biggest things of anything, and this even not coming to a CRO, any kind of senior leadership role that you want to move into, is that level of curiosity. You can't just be focused on what you do. You cannot just be focused on the sales outcomes of the business. You have to understand what marketing are doing. You have to understand what customer success are doing. You have to understand what their problems are, what the challenges that they face are, how they execute, and what good looks like. And you do that by being curious, right? You do that by asking questions, by being an active part of any conversations you have. And that goes with product. Even though the product isn't part of the CRO role, it's a big part of what you do. In any SaaS business, which is what I've worked in for the last sort of decade or so, it's product, market, sales in that order, right? So you have to understand there's a flow to things and you understand what's important. So yeah, I think that the biggest thing is being involved, being curious in what other people are doing, being active, but also there's a level of empathy that you need. It's really easy, and probably one of the issues a lot of salespeople face. Now, whether this is stereotype or fairly genuinely stereotype, is we have a tendency to have recency bias. My last prospect said this, so this is the truth. And we also have a tendency to want to drive through the thing that we need to make a sale. You have to have empathy. That isn't the most important thing necessarily to the other parts of the business or even the business as a whole, because not all sales are good sales, and you have to understand that. And I think it is a case of having that level of empathy around what's important, what's the bigger picture. And yes, you always want to have that sales lens, because revenue is revenue. You need to bring revenue in, but it's having that empathy and taking part and asking questions and understanding what other parts of the business are and what their drivers are.
Yeah, so there's a lot of learning. Sounds like a little bit of self-reflection. Sounds a little bit like information overload, at least in the beginning. So when you stepped into this role, was it harder than you expected, easier than you expected? What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced?
So this was my second CRO role. So I was a CRO in my previous employment, and then I came into Sweet Files as head of sales initially, and then transitioned into a CRO role. I think it's always harder than you expect it to be, because there's always a level of optimism. Oh yeah, this is all going to work exactly the way I planned it. And nothing ever does work exactly the way you planned it. So I think in some ways it's been harder. In some ways it's been really good in that we've managed to build a culture where we don't really think of ourselves as separate functions. We think of ourselves as a go-to-market team. Now, I don't have customer success at Sweet Files. I am marketing and sales particularly, but we're not a marketing and a sales team. We're a go-to-market team or a revenue team. And that's how we see things. And I think that's probably been the biggest success in what we do, in that by building that culture, building that nature, that's made it easier for me, because I haven't had to play that quarterback peacemaker piece as much as sometimes you have to, in terms of, no, look, I understand what you're going for. Being able to build that culture where we operate as a team has been the biggest thing, but it's always hard. It is a lot. And generally, you're also the part of the business that has the biggest spotlight on it. Because if sales numbers or the other metrics that you've got aren't performing as to where they need to be, that spotlight's going to be on you. And especially if one of the things that sales and marketing teams are well known for is generally blaming each other for a lack of performance. So if you own both of those from a results perspective, there's no one else to blame, really. So you have to own that.
And so I feel like the CRO role is relatively new in the C-suite over the last few years. So what do you think is driving that? Is it the clarity and the need for alignment? There's one person who's leading this function. And so why would a company move to that structure rather than a traditional here's sales, here's marketing? Because each of those are big departments, as you just said, and probably are obviously important roles. So why would a company move to this kind of structure?
There's two aspects to that. One is the internal need. And I think you've touched on that. It's that clarity of purpose. It's that breaking down of silos. It's that the ability to have a single picture of what we need to do. I think that's a big part of it. It's that and slightly probably non-politically ways that one throat to choke kind of thing. From a leadership perspective, a CEO or board, there's one person to hold accountability, and that person can't then divest that accountability because it's across is that. So I think that's one part of it. From a business function, it allows you to break down the silos. It allows you to move away from the traditional piece of, hey, marketing, I'm sales, give me more leads. Or, hey, sales, I'm giving you all these leads, you're not doing anything with them. It gets rid of that because you don't have those silos. You're one team, if you've built it correctly, who are all trying to do the same things. And therefore, that definition, well, this is an MQL, that is an SQL, that stops mattering because it doesn't matter where that lead comes from, as long as it's qualified and you're able to work it through. So it allows you to get away from some of that kind of old sort of style terminology and attribution, because attribution is always the hardest thing to do in marketing and sales, always. And yes, you still have to do it and you still have to know where those are coming from, but it matters a little less in terms of, well, who did the first press, who did the second press, did it go via an SDR? That sort of stops mattering as much. But I think the biggest driver, because that's all the internal stuff, but I think the biggest driver is actually the external piece. People don't buy the way they used to buy. Right? We don't have a traditional funnel of here's a lead and then it goes through the funnel and it steps down and you eventually pops out the other end as a sale and you've controlled that whole sales process. People don't buy that way anymore, and they haven't done for a long time. And I think the CRO role is enabling you to actually look at that buying cycle in a very different way, because it isn't just a case of, hey, marketing, provide me a lead, and then I step down the funnel, because you don't really necessarily always know at what point of the buying cycle someone's engaging with you. People will have done a lot of research. They will have gone away and educated themselves via either hopefully content that you've put out there or content that your competitors have put out there, or they will have done some education generally before they ever hit you. So having those two functions as separate doesn't really enable you to be nimble enough or to adapt quickly enough to suit the requirements of your buyers. And I think that the CRO role enables you to position your business better, because it's saying, well, actually, I don't care. Here's a touch point from a client. I don't want to have a delineated piece that says, okay, marketing need to talk to them here via pushed content. Actually, I want sales to touch them here. You don't have those boundaries. It's just a case of, well, actually, it can be different parts of the journey. Like, it might be early on, they've expressed some interest. They might have started to download a trial. You get an SDR, which we actually consider a marketing role, not a sales role, but an SDR or an MDR reaches out in a traditional sales function. Hey, I'd love to get you to demo. I'd love to show you a little bit more. And then they drift away. They might not engage. And then marketing picks back up the slack. And then we go into a nurture. And then sales reaches back out. Having that as different functions means you can get into that who's doing what when component, unless you have some really strong processes and disciplines. You still need those processes and disciplines, but having them under one remit makes it a lot easier to be flexible with how you engage and educate your prospects and how you manage that buyer journey.
So I'm interested in how you structure your team then. It's under one go-to-market. So talk to me a little bit about that. And also, if you can, what kind of KPIs they have. Like, it sounds like the whole team is sharing quota here, whether they were traditionally in a brand role or a marketing role or an SDR, obviously, where it's obviously got quota. Talk to us a little bit how you're structuring the team.
There's still a structure that is sales and marketing structure underneath it. And one of the things that we did towards the beginning of this year is I brought in a head of marketing. And part of the reason is I know I'm not a marketer, and there's areas of upskill and knowledge and transferable stuff that I can't give the rest of the marketers in my team to a level that I would need to. Now, I don't need a head of sales because I can perform that function as part of what I do. So for me, it was, okay, I need a head of marketing to be able to fill that gap that I can't deliver. So I have a head of marketing, we have a demand gen, we have content, and we have SDR. So that lives under the marketing side. And then we have AE function that sits under the sales side. And so those two quite distinct pieces in terms of structure. But in terms of day to day, our stand-ups are for the whole go-to-market team. We don't have a separate sales stand-up. We don't have a separate marketing stand-up. We do all of that together. We discuss things. In terms of KPIs, salespeople will always carry a quota because that's how you determine commission. But the marketing KPIs are aligned to that. So we have a North Star metric. For us, we know that we can convert X percentage of demos that we held. So our marketing team's functional KPI is how many demos they can get booked into a calendar. Now, we have other things around brand, we have other things around reach, we have other things around that are important that we measure and we have KPIs on that we can't always directly align to a demo booking because it doesn't, and we know that. But we appreciate their importance, so we measure those. But everyone in the team, in terms of discretionary bonuses or something along those lines, carries some level of a revenue number because that's the ultimate thing that we need to do as a business. We have to hit a revenue number.
I love how you still have the data in there, but you've eliminated MQLs, SQLs, because you're one team under one umbrella. So I think that probably gets a lot of the drama out of the mix when you've got it structured that way. You mentioned the buyer journey. So let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of buyer behavior.
That's a really good question. I do want to say we haven't completely eliminated MQLs and SQLs as much as I would love to, and as much as Nush, who's my head of marketing, Christine, my demand gen, would love to have completely eliminated it. We're on the journey to doing that, and I hate using the word journey in business senses more than anything. But we're in the process of. There's a level of upwards education that you have to do to be able to completely eliminate those from your business. We just don't focus necessarily on those as the metric. It's more engaged leads to demos, and then the rest of it doesn't matter that much in between. In terms of buyer journey, again, some of the things I talked about earlier, they're a lot more educated. 20 years ago when I worked in sales, you were expected to be the expert. When you turned up to a customer site and they said, I've got this problem, you were expected to know how to solve that problem, be the expert in the piece of tech that you were selling. That is much less the case. People come and say, this is what I'm trying to do. And what you are now is you're trying to educate and be a facilitator of the problems. Because yes, you need to know your product. Yes, you need to know the tech. But people are well researched. They know what they're trying to achieve. They'll come to you with some preconceived ideas around what they want to do. So that buyer journey is different. I think you see it's less the hard sell and less the, hey, look, buy my product. We have this feature, that feature. It's much more around, hey, what is a problem you're facing? Let's educate you on some ways you can solve that. And it is taking that kind of more consultative approach. And I think every salesperson on earth has always wanted to say, no, I'm a consultative seller or I'm a trusted advisor. And 99.9% of them are nowhere near either of those things. But it is a case of understanding, one, where they're at in the journey. And you do that by being curious and asking good questions and not just doing a show up and throw up demo of your product. It's actually doing proper discovery and understanding why people are talking to you in the first place. Understanding where they come from and why they're there is a big part of it. And in terms of other trends, budget is always prudent. Now, cost is never a big thing for us. We don't tend to lose on price, or it doesn't tend to be a price conversation. It tends to be a value conversation. But I think one of the things, certainly in our ecosystem, that we're seeing is there was a phase, probably, if I look in the accounting and professional services spaces, which is who we service primarily, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it was, there's an app for that, there's an app for that, there's an app for that. And people would have 15, 20. And I think the last piece of research we saw was like the average small business has 115 different apps inside their business that they use. And that's got to a point of fatigue. So people are now like, I don't want another app for this. I just want something that works. And that's what we're seeing a lot more of. It's people no longer want to do this and that and this. They just want stuff that works and makes their life easier.
Yeah, so buyers have definitely changed their ways over the past few years. Another thing that's changed over the past few years is where people are actually doing their work. So we were all in the office and then we were all remote. And now some people are still remote, some people are returning to office. How does that impact the way that you manage your team? Because you've got this very big umbrella to manage. Do you need that face to face time with them? Can they work remotely? Like, how do you approach that with your team?
I have a reasonably unique team. My team is, bar two of them, completely remote. So I have two people who are based in our head office in Wellington. Everybody else is remote. So I've got people, obviously I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. I've got someone in New Jersey. I've got someone in Melbourne. I've got somebody in the Waikato in New Zealand. So we're pretty well spread out. That does impact it. So I think that there are certain things that happen with remote teams versus non-remote, more traditional. Now, as someone who has been a remote worker now for probably 6 years, like directly not gone into an office on a daily basis for 6 years, really before the pandemic hit, I miss going into the office. Now, so I've recently started up a co-working or working in a co-working space in Birmingham, just really so that I can see people. Because I think there is an element of that learning by osmosis piece that you miss when you're not in an office, in terms of overhearing the conversation, hearing what's going on in the business. You miss that. So there's a lot of stuff you have to do in terms of to try and make up that delta. In terms of, we do daily stand-ups. Would I do a daily stand-up with an entire revenue team if everyone was based in the office? Probably not. I probably wouldn't do daily. I might do a little bit, but probably not to the level that we do. But that becomes really important when you have a team that's remote. For some of us, it's our main touch point of the day for the social aspect of it.
We do the same. Super important, a regular cadence, get everyone together, because people don't always work together in their day to day. Like it might be the only conversation they've got going, and just to get everybody in sync.
My stand-ups can end up being quite chaotic. They go off on tangents and they're not necessarily completely work related, because it's like, I want my team to be social with each other and make friends with people. And if you don't see them day to day, you just have to let that nature flowing kind of conversations. That's a big part of it. And then the use of tools, right? I think we're pretty heavy users of Slack. We use Teams for day-to-day meetings. A video meeting is never the same as an in-person meeting. It just isn't. You can do the best you can, but it isn't. But it's also doing things before we started on the podcast, closing things down so that you're present in a meeting. And I'm a nightmare for this. I get distracted I've got 3 screens set up and I currently have nothing open on 2 of them because I'm focused on this. But I'm a nightmare in meetings if stuff is open on the other screens. Oh, there's an email come in. Oh, look, there's something. So it is trying to make sure that you're present. And I have a lot to do to work on that. I am not by any stretch brilliant at it. But it is a case of utilizing those tools. But I think it's that touch points and making sure that keeping it as human as possible, even when there's all this technology around and face-to-face, it's remembering that person on the other end of the video is actually a real person and actually treating them as such.
So when it comes to sales, you still think, obviously you can sell online, but from a CRO perspective with the sales hat on, if you can get face-to-face, your perspective is those kind of deals are, if the value is there, it's worth.
Oh, yeah, we don't do a lot of them. Like, we don't do a lot of face-to-face. Like, most of our stuff is Zoom and Team. Like, it's hard to scale in terms of travel, right? Unless you're selling locally, then that scales. But if you're selling globally like we do, Julian sells all over Australia and New Zealand. I sell all over the US and the UK. And, and Luke does the same. That doesn't really scale if you're trying to do face-to-face all the time. With that being said, some of the larger deals that we've closed this year, Julian in Melbourne, for instance, has gone down the road and sat in an office and done those, because I think there is still an element of people do buy from people. If you can humanize that and you can go and see people, I'm always a fan of that. I think some of our best, in fact, our best performing channel last year in terms of, or this year, in terms of lead gen, in terms of close ratios, was conferences. And that's because you get to talk to people, you get to see them face to face, you get to have conversations en masse, admittedly, but you also get to, and it's the side things of those as well, the networking opportunities you get to do, the ecosystems that you get to build, all of that's important.
Yeah, we've seen those come back. So as you look out over next year, 2025, how do you see the role of the CRO changing?
I think like any revenue leadership role, whether that's sales, whether that's marketing and stuff, it's continually going to be more data driven. There's a lot more data that needs to be done, a lot more interpreting what stuff does. Attribution is going to continue to be a pain in the posterior for everybody. But I think that you're going to see a lot of that. I don't think it's any secret that paid advertising has become harder and harder for people to be successful with. The cost of doing it versus the benefit has been a struggle for a lot of people. And this is where the CROs need to trust the people they've got in place. You're going to see more branding. You're going to see more harder to measure activities needs to be done in order to get through the noise, because the traditional methods of cold outreach, of online advertising, of even content. You guys did some great work with us when we were building our content strategy early on, and we've continued to do that. But with the amount of fairly rubbish AI generated stuff that's being pushed out there, even if your stuff is really good, and we generally believe ours is, it's getting harder and harder to get people to see it because there's so much. So it is going to be a case of really trying to be adaptable, be nimble, look at what opportunities you have to do something different or to be seen to be doing something different. And I think one of the things that, just to touch back on a question around how we structured our team and some of the things that we've done a little bit differently since I took on, one of the things that we've really tried to build in is a culture of let's just try something. Like, obviously we've inset and we're not just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, but it is a case of it's okay to fail. No, it's okay to try something. It's okay to fail because we've tried something and we try to see. Now we want to test it. We want to make sure that we collate the results. You want to do these things properly, but it is that case of I'd rather try 10 things and 5 work than try 2 and 1 work. And I think you're going to see more of that because it's getting harder and harder to get through the noise. There's only so many places you can find people, LinkedIn, Google, Meta. There's only so many places people are that you can find them. So you have to find ways to make yourself stand out and seem a little different.
Yeah, I love that. So you're a 2-time CRO. What advice would you give for others looking to step up into that role, or just for people who are new in the role, wanting to make sure that they're successful?
Be careful what you wish for. No, look, I love the role. I think it's great. I think it comes with a lot of responsibility, so you have to be prepared for that, right? I think that's one of the things that with any CRO role or any role in a senior leadership team, to be honest, but CRO role, if you've asked for a role that's big and you've put your hand up for it, you have to be prepared with what comes with that. The biggest piece of advice I'd have is get a thick skin, because you're not going to be everybody's friend all the time. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Be able to create a culture where people are honest and upfront and open and don't have a fear of saying what they think, because it is impossible as a CRO to be an expert in all of the things that you have to deal with. And you hire people, hopefully, and I believe I have very much so, that are smarter than you in a lot of areas. So you have to trust their judgment. Hire people that are smarter than you and better at you at the things that you're not good at, and trust their judgment when you do. And have them feel like they're in a place that they can talk to you and say, look, no, Daniel, you're being an idiot. I want to do this. Or no, I don't think this is a good idea. Give a great example of that as of this week with Nush. I said, we want to do this conference. She's like, I really don't think that's a good idea. And here's why. Like, okay, I trust your judgment. That makes sense to me. Right, what else can we do? And I think also probably the biggest thing with any role like this is you have to be adaptable. You cannot be stuck in your ways. You cannot be, it's my way or the highway. You just can't be that way. You have to be prepared to go, okay, I was wrong. Oh, actually, no, that's a better idea. And I think that's the biggest thing with any role like this is you have to be adaptable and you have to trust the people that you're around you.
So what I'm hearing is buyer behavior is changing. So as a CRO responsible for securing more of those buyers, you have to be adaptable. And that means for you in your organization, you're fostering a team of people who are willing to sort of challenge what we're currently doing and suggest new ideas and just trying new tactics. You know, we haven't tried it. Let's try it. We'll try it on a small scale. It'll be controlled. It'll be measurable. If it works, we'll scale it up, but always be exploring new things, because then you can have this flexible, evolving go-to-market team that is going to keep up with not just the buyer, but also what everyone else is doing. You mentioned getting inundated with AI slop on the content side. That's another changing your go-to-market too. So to be successful in this role, you have to be super flexible.
Yeah, and I think that's any sort of fast-moving business any business now, right? Unless you have a captive audience. If you're in a traditional captive audience, like you're a petroleum company or something, if you don't evolve, you die, right? And I think that's the thing. And it is continually evolving, continually changing, continually appraising what you've got. And understanding your numbers is the other thing, right? You have to understand what your pipeline looks like, what your metrics are doing, and really have a good view and good feel for that at all times.
Wonderful. So Daniel Rock is the CRO for Suite Files, which, as you said, then is an intelligent workspace for professional services organizations, so accounting firms, but many others as well. Daniel, thanks for joining us here on Fired Up. If people want to get in touch with you, where should they go?
Just daniel@suitefiles.com. If they want to email me, that's fine. Or they can just go to the suitefiles.com is our website. They can find us there. I also have a sort of little personal podcast thing. So if people want to check that out, they can as well, which is just Wherever I Lay My Hat is the name of that. So totally non-work related. That's all about people's stories of home and how they found themselves and stuff like that. So it's a little bit different. So they can check that out. That has its own website, which is whereverIlayMyhat.com as well. But yeah, any of those channels, I'm always happy to jump into conversations, or they can look me up on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Dan, great to see you again. Thanks for your time today. Really enjoyed that. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks very much. Much appreciated.